This is FLOSS Weekly. I'm Doc Searls. This week, Aaron Newcomb and I are talking with Andre Kudra about retro computing and the Demoscene. Now, this is a topic that is actually hugely important from an open source perspective because these guys are getting really close to the metal. They're going back into the past and having enormous fun with it. It's really huge in Europe, the Demoscene especially, but also getting huge here. And we talk about all of this very informatively, and that is coming up next.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is FLOSS Weekly, episode 683, recorded Wednesday, June 1st, 2022. Retro computing and the Demoscene. This episode of FLOSS Weekly is brought to you by Compiler, an original podcast from Red Hat discussing tech topics big, small, and strange. Listen to Compiler on Apple Podcasts or anywhere you listen to podcasts. And by NetFoundry. Reinvent the network and eliminate the WAN by decoupling security from infrastructure to protect our applications and data with open source zero trust. Grab your free swag and free tier now by going to netfoundry.io/twit. And by Bitwarden. Get the password manager that offers a robust and cost-effective solution that can drastically increase your chances of staying safe online. Get started with a free trial of a Teams or Enterprise plan, or get started for free across all devices as an individual user at bitwarden.com/twit. Good morning, good evening, and good whatever it is, whenever you are. I am Doc Searls, and this is FLOSS Weekly, joined this week by Aaron Newcomb. Wherever he is, there he is. He's in his virtual space there, where he's smaller than the keyboard.
I've changed my background just for this particular episode.
Oh, that's perfect. That's perfect. So, were you on with Andre? Our guest is Andre Kudra. Were you on with him last time? I think so.
Yes, I was. Okay. And he turned me on to a few things in the Demoscene that, I lost quite a bit of time checking out after that episode, of course, like we often do with topics here on FLOSS Weekly. But yeah, I definitely kind of delved into some of the things. You can go pretty deep in the Demoscene if you want to, and there's tons of things to check out and see what's possible. And we're going to talk about that, I think, a little bit more. But I was definitely on, and I look forward to talking to him again because we definitely share a love of retro computing and the Demoscene as well.
Yeah, I think this is one of those cases where we have a guest that's a perfect match for the co-host. So I expect you to carry most of the water on this one. I knew nothing about the Demoscene before this, so I'm looking forward to digging down deeply in it. And because we're getting off to a little bit of a late start, I want to let everybody know that this episode of FLOSS Weekly is brought to you by Compiler, an original podcast from Red Hat discussing tech topics, big, small, and strange. Compiler comes to you from the makers of Command Line Heroes, another of our sponsors, and is hosted by Angela Andrews and Brent Simoneau. Technology can be big, bold, bizarre, and complicated. Compiler unravels industry topics, trends, and the things you've always wanted to know about tech through interviews with the people who know it best. On their show, you'll hear a chorus of perspectives from the diverse communities behind the code. Compiler brings together a curious team of Red Hatters to tackle big questions in tech, like what's technical debt? What are tech hiring managers actually looking for? And do you have to know how to code to get started in open source? Episode 2 covers what can video games teach us about edge computing. The internet is a patchwork of international agreements and varying infrastructure, but there's something coming to change the ways we connect. In this episode of Compiler, hosts explore what edge computing could mean for people who enjoy video games and what this form of entertainment could teach us about technology. Episode 9, how are tech hubs changing? Traditionally, if someone wanted a career in tech, they had to make the move to a tech hub, a city packed with startups and talent. But things are starting to change. The hosts of Compiler speak to a few of the change makers who are thinking outside of the physical and social dimensions we've come to associate with innovation. And this one, by the way, is close to my past because I lived in the same hood as Red Hat in North Carolina and moved to Silicon Valley in the 1980s because that's where I had to be. So that episode is really close to my own past because it happened now. I might not move. So learn more about Compiler at red.ht/twit. New episodes are out now. Go and download them at any time. And be sure to check back for new shows. Listen to Compiler on Apple Podcasts or anywhere you listen to podcasts. We'll also include a link on this episode's show page. My thanks to Compiler for their support. Okay, so our guest this time is Andre Kudra. Andre was on before, about a year ago, maybe a little more. I'm not sure. Time flies because it feels like it was just a couple months ago. But mostly we talked then about SSI, self-sovereign identity, which is close to my heart and mind. And we've had quite a few people on the show talking about that because I think it's a real open source greenfield. But Andre is huge with retro computing and the Demoscene, and that's close to the heart and mind of Aaron Newcomb, our co-host. So I want to welcome Andre to the show. Welcome back, Andre. There you are. with a new background.
Thanks for having me again. My pleasure.
So where are you physically? Where are you physically, and what is that background?
Well, I'm currently physically I'm in Lucerne, Switzerland, but what you see behind me is the room of a demo party called Assembly in Helsinki. So I've chosen this virtual background for now, but I can show you some other stuff later.
Well, we were talking before the show about the Demoscene, and why don't we start there, because that's an area about which I knew nothing before this, and I know a little now, but you're deep into it. So, and I think it's bigger in Europe and elsewhere than it is in the U.S., but maybe I'm wrong about that. So fill us in.
Yeah, it basically started off in the early days of the home computers like Commodore 64 and all the others that came after, Amiga, Atari, whatever you want to have. So, and basically people started putting little intros in front of the software they cracked. So at first they were called crackros, but this evolved later on into a completely independent computer and digital art scene, which is now known as the Demoscene. So basically it started off from these rarest times when people swapped disks and illegally copied games and intros, and this spawned the whole subculture of digital art.
Yeah, There's been some pretty famous demos for people that are still not quite sure what the Demoscene is. I mean, it really is all about pushing the limits of the particular platform. Pick a platform. You mentioned Commodore 64, for example. I know Amiga has a lot of really famous demos, but it's really about pushing the limits of the platform and almost in a competition kind of way, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So it basically started off as little intro cards in front of the software, but then this kind of evolved into something where people showed off their coding skills. And obviously the platforms give the natural limits what you can do. And these limits seem to have been pushed farther and farther out. So if you look at a demo that is contemporary on C64 on Amiga, you're basically blown away because you cannot believe this is in fact possible on such a platform. And this limitations also have been brought to the newer platforms. So if you obviously code something on a PC today, this is much different. But the self-limitation goes to something which is known to size coding. So people restrict their executable code to 64K or 8K or even 4K or 256 bytes. And with this natural limitations, or self-imposed limitations, there comes a new challenge. And people like to compete in the Demoscene, so they create categories in which they compete. And this is what has come out of this.
And how do these folks get together? What's their, tell us about the organization of this. Currently, there are actually events, right, where people get together and, actually are given a time limit, and it's okay, you have to get this done in this amount of time, and then you come back and there's judging, right? Tell us about how that works.
Yeah, so you actually submit your entry, which is a piece of code or a graphic or a music piece, into the category for a demo party. So people get together at these demo parties, and there are lots and frequent demo parties, at least before the pandemic, but now it's picking up again. And the biggest ones that are known all over the world are Revision. In Germany, it's the Easter party, so everyone's coming together over Easter, the whole Easter holiday time, and there's a huge event with I don't know 20 different categories in which you can submit your entries up to a certain point, and then they are shown at the party, so they are aired, so to say, and then you can, as a participant of the party, you can vote, and then after the vote, there's a ranking and the winner. And for the Demoscene, there's also something called Meteorics Awards. So a jury basically gets together and votes on the most popular and most stunning demos in this category. So sometimes it's referred to as the Oscar of the Demoscene, but it's really cool. So check it out, Meteorics with a K.
And also, what are the categories usually? Like, what are the various categories that happen these days?
Yeah, so the most popular ones are the coding categories, obviously in the old school, and now a new term has been called mid school, which is more like the 16-bit platforms, because they are huge. And then the newer platforms like PC with basically no limitations at all. And they're with a certain limitation. So sometimes it's restricted to a certain platform only. Like in the old school, you have usually C64 or Atari, older platforms of Atari 400, 800, something like that, or even C16, VIC-20, and stuff like that. Then in this newly formed mid-school category, you have the 16-bit platforms like Amiga and Atari ST and others in that category. And in the PC class, which is basically unlimited, you have a certain setup that you can use, like OpenGL graphics and everything, where you can work with shaders and all this newer stuff. But as I said, with self-imposed limitations like size limits on the executables, you get to different categories. So if you pull up the Revision website, you can look at the categories that are in fact in place there. This is all about coding. But there's also other categories. So for people who cannot code and they are good at graphics or at music, they can submit their pieces in the graphics categories or in the music categories. And this is so yeah, this is the website there. So if you get out on competitions, you will see the different categories that are out there.
So I'm curious about something. Generally, when you have a conference, there are sponsors, and sponsors generally want to push whatever they're doing now. And I'm thinking, well, Amiga, Commodore, they're gone. So it's maybe a dumb question, but do the Demoscene events have and the parties have corporate sponsors? And if so, what is their pitch if there is one?
Yeah, well, there's this is a very interesting question, Doc. So what actually everyone wants is a great party with lots of great infrastructure, and someone has to pay for it. So usually a demo party is financed by the individuals who come there. They pay a small entrance fee, and there are sponsors as well, which are usually from the IT and tech industry, because they think it's a good idea to sponsor this kind of culture. But in general, obviously, it's not so. Well, people don't like at all the time that this is going to be corporate and enterprise style, so that the enterprise corporate money swamps this culture. So it's kind of a interesting balance that has to be taken. But usually the parties are they are supported by volunteers, and all the technology and the infrastructure setup is paid by the entrance fees and the sponsors, who are supposedly not too much imposing on their sponsorship there. So it's kind of a mixed bag of things. Obviously, what has now happened and makes it very attractive is that is a culture, a digital culture, one of the first digital cultures that was ever there. And now there's a project underway to bring this digital culture, the Demoscene, on the UNESCO list of intangible cultural heritages. And this project has been going on for a while. It's called Art of Coding. I'm also a contributor to that project. And this basically asks people from the scene to file national applications for the UNESCO Intangible Cultural Heritages list to get to a transnational application so that it's worldwide recognized. And this has already been very successful in Finland, Germany, and Poland, as the Demoscene is at the national lists of UNESCO Intangible Cultural Heritages in these countries. So there's other countries working on applications for the UNESCO. So we have also a Discord channel where we get together. So Switzerland is active, and France and others. And as soon as we have enough countries being recognized by UNESCO, we will file the transnational application and hopefully get the intangible cultural heritage status for the Demoscene worldwide.
So I'm wondering, it sounds to me a little bit like the Demoscene is for coding and geekery in general, kind of what Eurovision is for live performance, and which is to say a European thing about which people in the US know almost nothing other than that's a big thing in Europe. And I'm wondering if how big it is or how big it could be in the US, or what we should do here. And I said, we have a worldwide audience, so it's not like we are US centric, aside from the fact that that's where Aaron and I happen to be. But I'm wondering, how big is it here, and what can we do to make it bigger?
It's not as big as it should be. That's the honest and current answer. So there's lots of interest, obviously, in the States. If you look at this demo party website that I sent to you, if you look at the categories or the countries, you see that there are very few parties in the US, and this obviously needs changing. So if you look at the country list, so you see there's parties mainly in Europe, Eastern Europe, Northern Europe, Central Europe, also UK, and this is kind of very conglomerated on these areas. So it would be really cool to have it more as a worldwide thing. There is Tokyo Demo Fest, which is also interesting, but this is also a very local event. And in the US, we had a couple of demo parties like Synchrony, which was very cool. It's happening on a train between, I think, New York City and somewhere in Canada. You can look it up. And but these are not in the order of magnitude that we see in Europe. So if you go to Revision is a party which is about 1,000 on-site visitors with a huge live stream audience as well. So this is a big thing, and obviously everyone is now hungry for getting back to the party. So this year, Revision was held as a satellite version. So this means Revision was basically split up in 16 satellites, which happened in local communities, also like in Switzerland and in Spain and Portugal and wherever. So people called these local events just to not bring 1,000 people at the end of the pandemic together again. So, but next year, obviously, everyone is hopefully getting back together on site in Saarbrücken for Revision and is celebrating in person again. And obviously, this could be done in the US. So if we find a community there that would be willing to contribute, and I know we have people from the US who watch the stream and get involved, but I mean, having a real huge demo party in the US would be great.
So I want to let people at least get an idea for what these demos look like, and you can kind of go back and see some of the most famous ones, from the past where people were really pushing the limits, and then you can go look at some of the current stuff that people are doing. One of the most famous ones that I know of is for the Amiga, and it's called State of the Art by a group called Spaceballs, and it just seems like this was a super popular demo. I think it was released in 1992, actually at a demo party, or it was conceived at a demo party. I don't know if they finished it there. But this is one of the most popular ones. And in part because it has dancing silhouettes of women dancing, right? But at the time, it was really, really difficult to motion graphics in that way with moving backgrounds and text that would, kind of bend and warp. I mean, that was really kind of difficult to do on these platforms. So anybody that could make that work, could produce something really, really cool. And then those enhancements that were made by some of these demos then would make their way into the games that people enjoyed or the programs that people enjoyed, because people found ways to push the limits and do things more efficiently. And then those techniques would work their way into actual, commercial software as well. What are some of the famous demos that you're aware of from history? Like, what would you call out as like the pinnacle of the demo scene back in the olden days, the 90s and the 80s?
Yeah, I have to be very honest with you. I'm a fairly new joiner of the demo scene. So basically I wasn't in it in the early days. I got connected to it 7 years ago. That was my first time in 2015 at Revision, and I was completely blown away. I obviously knew some of the old stuff because it was on the discs that I also had, and I learned about this community, that it was still so active only in 2015, and I've been following along since then. Obviously, I don't want to have an imbalanced view on who is good and who not. But if you look at the Meteorix Awards and the first ranking productions at Revision, you see usually what's good. We have just recently, you probably know about that, the A500 Mini, which is a FPGA or emulator remake of the A500 Amiga, has come out, and I have gotten together with two Demoscene friends of mine, and we have compiled a list of demos we think are really cool at the Amiga. I can share the list with you, and we have written an article for a magazine which is featuring the A500 Mini there. So one of the new productions is Aeon by the Black Lotus on the Amiga. If you look at this, you think this is not doable on a machine that is more than 35 years old.
Yeah. I think some of these things are pretty amazing that came out. There's another demo for the C64, for example, called Crest and Oxyron. And I can't remember. I don't remember how old this particular one is. I don't remember when it came out. But when you look at it, it's pretty crazy because if people are familiar with C64, you see the kind of bluish screen that comes up, right? And then that starts to part, and then the wavy text comes in, and some of this stuff just blows your mind with what's possible on a machine that has so little memory and a processor that was created back in the 70s, and it's just amazing some of the stuff that people can do. So. Yeah, I would highly recommend people take a look at some of these. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is very popular, doing this kind of screen transitions out of the basically boot screen. This is you drop into the basic, and then you load the program, and then that's a very good practice to basically move away the screen with special effects that are moving away the characters or moving away the colors and the bars and so on, like you're showing there now. This is very, very popular doing this transition. So if it's if the choreography is done well, this basically is a stylistic means of getting rid of the starting screen. Yeah, this is also done on the Amiga. Yeah.
And the music too, right? I mean, so we can't hear the music, but there's music that goes along with this. And, it really is kind of going down the rabbit. It's kind of like the Matrix, right? At least that's what it feels like when you're used to seeing these systems in their original state. And then you see them doing these things that are just, beyond your imagination of what's possible. I mean, it really is eye-opening and kind of, I think it leads people to want to explore more on these systems and kind of gets them more interested in what they can do with computing in general.
Yeah, you may want to pull a demo that's called The Fall, which basically shows elegantly the fall into the rabbit hole on such a platform. That's a really cool demo to watch. I think it's also on the Meteorix list, or at least one of the most popular ones of the past parties. So, and one thing I want to mention is actually what you said. So this shows the limits of what was possible at a certain point in time. So you've shown the one before, which does the image capture. Though this was in fact done by doing a video recording of the girls dancing there, and then transforming it into the vector objects on the Amiga. So no one had done it before. So they were basically, or very few had done it before. So they were the early movers and showed that this was possible. So they were breaking new grounds, and this has happened basically since the creation of these machines. So if you look at contemporary software, there is such a thing as contemporary software. So basically for a C64 and Amiga, every month a new software comes out. So if you look at contemporary stuff, like on a C64, a game called Sam's Journey, this has basically extended the color palette, which was a technique that was derived from the Demoscene. So they basically identified ways of doing more colors than were actually possible with the graphics chip. And these technology was put into the software in a game. And if you look at it, it doesn't look like a C64 game at all, because you think this can't be true because it's just too many colors. So if you look at stuff like that, there's so many talented people still working on these platforms. This is absolutely amazing. And I love the spirit and the atmosphere of the people getting together and celebrating their skills and their creativity.
Well, I have a question after this, but first I have to let people know that this episode of FLOSS Weekly is brought to you by NetFoundry. Networking has traditionally been handled by dedicated teams and personnel. You could say network security has been deemed too important to leave in the hands of developers. One of our sponsors, NetFoundry, believes differently. Secure connectivity is too important to be taken away from developers and has forced dependency and stifled innovation and business velocity, or unnecessarily trades off security for those benefits. Therefore, NetFoundry created and maintains OpenZiti, that's OpenZiti, providing an open source, free, and easy way for the world to embed zero trust networking into anything. It provides everything you need to spin up a truly private zero trust overlay network in minutes across anything, directly in your app, on any device, or in any cloud, built on principles of extensibility, flexibility, and scalability. Attacks from insecure networks can become a thing of the past. External network attacks, including DDoS attacks, brute force, credential stuffing, CVE or zero-day exploits, BGP hijacks, phishing, and more, can be stopped. This is truly zero trust of all networks. No need for expensive and risky reactive patching. Agnostic design patterns ensure you only need commodity internet with outbound ports, without needing network engineering skills to implement it. Say goodbye to complex firewall rules, inbound ports, public DNS, static network access controls, and VPNs. Spring 4 Shell and Windows RPC RCE are recent exploits, CVEs. The recommendation is to cloud inbound ports, but OpenZiti allows you to have no inbound ports at all. OpenZiti was mentioned in Java Magazine about how they zitified the Spring Boot for any Java app. Moral of that story: those who make themselves dark cannot be exploited by Spring for Shell or other network attacks. Eliminate the tug of war between developers and security. The former can work programmatically with software, while the latter have isolated apps driven by policy visibility and logs they require. Zero trust is a journey, so start wherever you need based on your priorities. OpenZiti offers numerous SDKs, tunneling apps for popular OSs and edge routers and cloud marketplaces. If you don't want to host OpenZiti, use the NetFoundry SaaS, including free forever tiers for up to 10 endpoints. Head to netfoundry.io/twit to grab some free swag, learn more, and get started. That's netfoundry.io/twit and get your free swag and free tier now. Okay, so I have a question that may be a transition to the retro computing topic that we also want to cover. my retro device back in the decade when my now 50-year-old kids were small and when I was a young adult was the VIC-20, the Commodore VIC-20. And I think, is that actually too retro at this point? Because it ended up in a closet for me, but I know Linus Torvalds actually started out on a VIC-20, and we might not have Linux without that. So, so I don't know. Is that a relevant machine at this point, or for the demo scene?
So.
For
very much so, Doc. I mean, if I had time, I'd go grab one from the Retro Hack Shack here behind me. But no, those machines are still very relevant. People love them. I mean, a lot of people had their first computing experience with a VIC-20 or a PET that came out before that, Commodore PET. So yeah, I think they're still very relevant and pretty popular. If you look at some of the YouTube channels, people are still fixing them, repairing them, showing off demos for the VIC-20 even. So yeah, my opinion is they're still pretty popular.
So yeah, Andre just changed his background. So.
I just wanted to pull the Amiga picture again because this is I mean, people celebrate the old platforms all over the place. So in fact, there's a little bit of a trend because C64 and Amiga have been platforms that have been basically swamped with stunning products in the past years. So people then who are skilled on that platforms obviously have a skill on others as well, or can easily transform their skills on another platform. So if you basically want to show what's possible on a VIC-20 and you know how to do it on a C64, you basically have a new challenge because you have much more limitations there. So if you can do even cool stuff on a VIC-20, there's more new ground to break. And this is what we see. There's demos or even games on VIC-20 coming out today to basically show what's possible on such a restricted platform. Yeah, and maybe to give you a bit of a feel for demos. So, the article that I mentioned that I created together with my two friends. One is called Psychon in the Demoscene. I have my scene name is Kudrix, and the other guy is Ronnie Blees, who is a musician, absolutely stunning, brilliant, talented guy. So these two guys have helped me to assemble the list of demos. So I can give you a list of Amiga demos that are really worth watching. If you want, this is going to be in the Return German special issue for the A500 Mini magazine. So basically, Spaceballs, you mentioned, this was also on our list, and others are Way to Root by Logicoma and Loonies, revision 2020 winner in the 64K category in the original chipset Amigas. The absolutely brilliant music and graphics in sync. One of the really cool ones is Eon by the Black Lotus. I mentioned that. And Eon, Black Lotus, has done also really cool stuff in the earlier years. It's one of the ones is called Starstruck, which is really cool. If you look at it, it's from 2006. You cannot believe it's running on an Amiga. And one of the newer ones is Martini Effect by Flex. This is kind of a newcomer group. So people having not done this before on the platform just drop by and release the stunning piece. I can send you the list of the things later on if you want to put them on the website. So there is so many cool productions coming out every year, every party, and people are not getting tired of doing stuff like that. So it's amazing, and it's for the fun, it's for the art, it's for the platforms, it's for the community. So it's really cool. And maybe to give a little bit of a hint, what does this have to do with open source? So actually, in the former days, people were kind of reluctant to easily disclose their coding techniques because obviously, if you're the guy who invented a certain technique, you're not wanting to share the knowledge easily, but this has significantly changed. So particularly if you look at the newer size coding pieces coming out, you see people are eager to to tell and educate others how this works, so that they can basically broaden the competition base, so that people are lured into the scene. So the scene is kind of full of people that are my age. And we actually are really keen on getting new ones in, also more female coders in, and people who are interested from all over the world. So this is kind of a way of getting into it, because it is so open. So it's open. You can learn about it. It's all well documented. You can look at the old stuff on the websites. It's like huge archives of demos being released on Demoscene, on Poe. That are the key websites where you can basically look at the old stuff and see who has done it and when and where it was released and what was the rank on the party. So you can get into it easily, because you have such a huge repository of material where you can draw from and learn from. And particularly with the size coding activities that are going on, you have a wiki which explains the coding techniques, how you get to a 256 bytes intro. So if you want to see a stunning one, I recommend watching Memories by Helmut. It's unbelievable. It's 256 bytes. It has, I think, 7 effects, including transitions. You cannot believe it's possible. So I highly recommend looking into
limited,
that.
Yeah, especially in that limited amount of space. I mean, I think you recommended that one to me. It might have been even after we finished the last episode that we had you on.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, it just kind of blows your mind. It's like, well, how is this even, for people that are used to seeing, like, for example, Tetris in one line of code, in Perl or something like that. That was pretty amazing to me back when I was programming in Perl. But yeah, you look at this, you say, how do you fit all that stuff in such a small amount of space? It really is crazy. I think there are other parallels as well with to open source. So I mean, the code itself could be open source, but a lot of times we talk about for people that are getting started or want to go into software engineering careers, one of the best way to get started is to get plugged into an open source project on GitHub or something. Start fixing some issues. Try to take a look and help out, and then you can kind of add that to your resume. I think this is another area where you could add to your resume as well if you're looking to get started here. The Demoscene or hackathons in general, I think, are a great way to get started. If I was a technology company that was looking for people to do software engineering close to the hardware, right? So writing things in C or assembly, things like that. I mean, I would definitely go to a Demoscene or a demo party as a kind of a recruiting tool, or use that as a really valuable experience, because these are the people that can get things done really efficiently down close to the bare metal. And so that's going to result in an application that runs much more quickly than it would otherwise. So I think it's a great place for recruiting, and a great place to get some experience for those people who may want to get into the software development as a career.
Yeah, absolutely. Well put, Aaron. So I think that's exactly the point. So people are they know how to code efficiently, and they know their platform well. So if you look at what we have today, so we have on a standard machine, you have layers upon layers upon layers. So this is a complexity that also is a security nightmare in the end. So if you have people who know really how to code efficiently, they will produce better code, because it has a lower vulnerability surface, because it's not so much there that can be compromised. So it's a really good recruiting pool. Obviously, many of these people are already in the technology jobs, or in game development, or in design studios or whatever. So because this is kind of the natural fit. So people who do this in their job, they know this, they have the skill set, they can transport it to what they like in their doing in their free time, and that's actually what we are seeing as well. And
sorry.
Just one thing. So actually, to make it more interesting and more tangible for people who want to have a bit more action or real life action, new categories have been introduced into the Demoscene, like shader coding. So this is basically a shootout where two people code against one another, and you see actually the results of their code live on screen. So you see them type, and you see the image rendering directly when they have basically done the code. And then the audience in the end calls the winner of this battle, and this continues. So it's like a challenge competition in a demo party that is really actionable with the audience. So it's really, really cool. I highly recommend it. And this is where you put Floppy in a news, and they are they are great. So if you look at what they do and how the audience cheers, and how they get stuff done in 10 or 15 minutes, it's unbelievable. And this is kind of a way of getting also new people in, because there's so many different ways how you can contribute if you want to touch base with this community. So there's not such one single path of introducing the scene. If you're an old schooler, you can do the old school stuff. If you want to do graphics, you can do graphics. If you do ANSI art only with characters, you can do that. If you're more musician, you can introduce stuff like that. If you're a coder, then obviously you're often in high demand in demo groups. So there's such a broad possibility of getting into the scene. So I highly recommend. And the best way is obviously getting to a demo party, getting in touch with folks, looking at this, experiencing the atmosphere. Talking about a demo is good, but if there's nothing like experiencing it or being released at a party and the people cheering and being stunned together. So I highly recommend going.
Yeah, for sure. And there's also another kind of parallel. We talk a lot about open hardware as well, right? Not just open software, but open hardware is a big deal. And there's a lot of open hardware now being developed for these retro systems, because a lot of it's about nostalgia, right? People want to grab their VIC-20, for example, out of a box in the attic or whatever, and plug it in and kind of relive their childhood a little bit. But what they find is that there's issues, right, with doing that, which is you may not have a TV that supports an analog RF input, for example, right? So then what do you do? How do you get this thing connected? You have to go to a thrift store and find an old TV that accepts an analog RF input, or you have to mod the system to be able to maybe output to HDMI. And I think there's a big scene right now, not just the demo scene, but a hardware scene, where people are developing these projects to allow people to do that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're doing a great job yourself, Aaron, aren't you? So I think this is exactly the point. So people, not everyone wants to be down at that level to basically get the old gear and get it going. So you can do that, but it's going to be complicated over the years, because if you want to hook up a Commodore 64 to a contemporary monitor, you have to get one that is working. And this is what I call high involvement retro computing. So if you want to do that, you can. But the most easy way is to basically get an emulator and let it run on your contemporary PC, which I don't recommend because it's not the fun of doing that. So I would recommend of getting something that is old, but combine it with easy to handle stuff that you have today. So basically what you said is a very common case. How do I connect a Commodore 64 or an Amiga to a contemporary HDMI flat screen monitor? So there's open source projects which help you to transform the signal with as little lag as possible, so that you can watch it on your screen. So one of the very popular examples is the OSSC, which is it's a graphic scaler which scales an RGB signal to HDMI without any lag. It's a completely open source repository, and there are manufacturers who basically create it, and you can buy it. You can buy the pieces and assemble it on your own, or you can buy a completely assembled gear. So this is kind of the thing how you can basically work with the stuff today without compromising the retro feeling.
Yeah, exactly. And the same is true with the product that I sell on my website. A slight plug here, not really, but it's a good example, which is the RGB to HDMI board, who was created by Hoglet and then developed now by E&B. But what this does is it basically allows you to take some of these old systems, especially the older ones, and output HDMI quality video to a flat screen like that. And the nice thing about it is, I don't know if I'll have to ask Ian if the DIY version is officially open hardware or not. But there's just like the OSSC, this project has a DIY version, so that if somebody wants to go in and get their own boards produced and populate them with the components, they can build it themselves from scratch. There are some slight differences in the product that I sell, some slight advancements and things like that are in that project. But if you want to do it yourself, you can. In large part, a lot of these designs are available on GitHub, and you can go in and play with them to your heart's content, or make them better, make new versions. So I think that for a lot of us in the retro computer that have this as a hobby, really appreciate. I know I really appreciate when people put these designs up to make these older computers work with newer technologies. When they put those up on GitHub and allow the community to enjoy them or use them or redesign them as they see fit. So the community is very, very supportive of the idea of open hardware and making this stuff available for those, because it's like I said, it's all about nostalgia. It's all about most of the people that are in this hobby, not all of them. There are some younger people that have gotten into these older computers too. But for a lot of us, it's really about reliving our childhood and learning about computers that we never had access to. I know that's a big part of it for me. And these projects, these open hardware projects that are available, really help people to be able to take their old computer to new heights, really, that weren't possible back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s.
Yeah, absolutely. Please go ahead.
Go ahead, Andre. No, you go ahead first.
It's actually, obviously, many people want to relive the past, which is to some degree possible at these events. But then if you step out of it, it's a different reality again, which we all know. But in general, it's absolutely cool to get in touch with technology and learn about technology. Because if you look at a C64 it's a complex machine still, but it's very simple. So one single individual can understand every single register in this thing and know every function of it. And this is also the reason why so stunning pieces are squeezed out of that thing all the time, because people can understand everything and can do the logic inside their heads to some degree and make it going. And if this is really, really a good way of getting in touch with technology and understanding what is going on top to bottom, what is necessary to get the signal out of this thing to come to your screen or to your ears. And this is kind of the best way of understanding technology. And this is what I think is lacking in these days, that people who are into computing, they are not so much really into computing anymore. They want to learn how to code, so they basically start up their development environment and start coding, and they have no clue what's going on inside the machine. And I think this is kind of a loss, because the skills that transform from electrical engineering to coding to what's coming out on your screen or your speakers is lost. And I think this is not good for mankind's development in the technology age.
I have to interrupt this to say, I'm sitting in this old library in this house, okay, and I've opened a window so I have some ventilation, and literally a bird just flew in. It's about 4 feet from my feet right now, and it's pecking on the old rug here, getting food out of it, I guess. I don't know. This is not a relevant thing, but it's an interesting thing, because this thing is right here ignoring me and completely incongruous. I'm thinking later I'm going to have to get this bird out of this house, and I don't know how I'll do it. Anyway, I think
that's hilarious. You're kind of like Bernie Sanders, Doc.
I suppose.
Remember that moment where the bird came in and flew on his shoulder, like on the podium there?
Oh, really? I forgot about that.
Yeah.
There's something attractive to birds about old people. I think maybe that's the deal. Anyway, this is like over there is some furniture that talks. Anyway, I'm remembering that. I mean, what I loved about, because I'm from an even earlier generation, what I loved about a 5-tube medium wave radio or the kits that I built with for the Heath kits and the Lafayette kits, was that I understood everything in there. You know, I knew what even what a 7 transistor or an 8 transistor radio did and how it worked. And part of the attraction of the VIC-20 is that you see computing, you see what it is right there. And I remember one of my earliest business clients was a guy who was a doctor, actually, who was a geek on the side, and a young doctor who wrote a program called Ken Houston's Professional Blackjack for the Apple II, had to get it inside 48K. And this is right when the IBM PC was coming along. He wanted to get it on the IBM PC. He knew he could do that in 64K. And I remember him debating what language he was going to use. I think he went with Forth. I don't even know if people still write in Forth. I haven't heard the word used recently. But you had the sense that you know how these things work. You know what it is. Not just, I think the closer to the metal you can get and the lower level you can go, the better your understanding of computing naturally is. And that may be a mistake on my part to assume so, because great stuff's being done at higher levels, of course. But I'm remembering back then with some nostalgia as well. Anybody do any blackjack programs, or is that just not interesting enough for the demo scene?
Yeah, games don't really fit. There's usually a category called games where people submit some fun entries, but I think blackjack, I don't know if blackjack has been done.
It's not interesting enough.
Yeah, well, it's not that it's not interesting. It probably just doesn't. It's not as challenging to do a blackjack game as make the wavy text go around and have all these cool transitions and all that kind of stuff. It doesn't tax the limits of some of these old systems enough, probably.
By the way, I have pulled a picture from Revision. This is kind of the usual setup. It looks like a LAN party, but it's actually people coding on site. So as you mentioned before, Aaron, some of these entries are finished on site because people approach the deadline and they want to finish something at a party, or some pieces are also completely coded on a party while on site. So this is kind of also the spirit. So there you have these huge productions, and you have productions which are more rudimentary, but people do their stuff and they communicate also with the productions that they do. And you see there's the tables there where people get together and code and have their space, and then you have the big screen where the demos are aired. And when the time has come, and then the crowd is looking and cheering and voting, and yeah, it's a brilliant experience. So many people also stay on site. So this is not like it's like a camp atmosphere almost. So you have usually a hall where people can sleep, or some who are not into that, they go to the hotels close by. It's like a huge party over a couple of days, and it's a great community spirit.
This has been a quick and fulfilling hour, and we're not done with it yet because we have some closing great questions. But first, I have to let you know this episode of FLOSS Weekly is brought to you by Bitwarden. Bitwarden is the only open source cross-platform password manager that can be used at home, at work, or on the go, and is trusted by millions. With Bitwarden, you can securely store credentials across personal and business worlds. Every Bitwarden account begins with the creation of a personal vault. Bitwarden has big news. After launching the username generator last month, they're integrating with 3 popular email forwarding services that also happen to be open source. That's Simple Login, Anon-Addy, and Firefox Relay. Now adding another layer of security and privacy is easier than ever when using Bitwarden to generate a new username. The option to create an email alias is presented with a subsection for choosing your preferred service. Just enter the API key for your individual account with the chosen service. Select the desired options, and once generated, a new alias is instantly registered to your account. Using unique usernames, email addresses, and passwords for every account is a powerful method for increasing internet security and privacy, and adds protection to logins in the face of data breaches and leaks. This feature will be available on the Web Vault desktop app and browser extensions, with mobile planned for a future release coming soon. Bitwarden is a must-need for your business. It's fully customizable and adapts to your business needs. Use Bitwarden Send, a fully encrypted method to transmit sensitive information, whether text or files. Generate unique and secure passwords for every site with enterprise-grade security that's GDPR, CCPA, HIPAA, and SOC 2 compliant. Their end-to-end encrypted vault helps mitigate phishing attacks. Their Teams organization option is a $3 a month per user deal. Share private data securely with coworkers across departments or the entire company. Enterprises can use Bitwarden's Enterprise Organization Plan for just $5 a month per user. Individuals can use their basic free account forever for an unlimited number of passwords, or upgrade any time to their premium account for less than $1 a month. Their family organization option gives up to 6 users premium features for only $3.33 a month. At TWiT, we're fans of Password Manager. Bitwarden is the only open source cross-platform password manager that can be used at home, on the go, or at work, and is trusted by millions of individuals, teams, and organizations worldwide. Get started with a free trial of a Teams or Enterprise plan, or get started for free across all devices as an individual user at bitwarden.com/twit. That's bitwarden.com/twit. So, Andre, we always end the show with a bunch of short questions. The first is there anything we haven't asked yet you'd like us to have asked before we go?
Oh, wow. I think there's tons of more stuff we could talk about. So maybe we should at some point spend some time, if we do a video show on looking and stuff and commenting why it's so great. I think that would be a cool thing to do. And I basically I can encourage everyone to join this community. Even though you think retro computing and Demoscene are completely the same thing, it's not. So there's people who are more into retro computing and getting together and nerding around with old stuff. And the Demoscene is different. It's people doing stuff on the machine and competing in this category. So it has a lot of overlaps, but it's not totally the same. So if you're in one, that doesn't mean you're in the other as well. But I think it goes well together. So I think that's something also worth exploring a bit more. How do these different digital cultures relate, or go well together, or not go well together? I think that's something which we could also at some point talk about. Yeah, and I don't want to close down before calling out to my homies with whom I work and cheer and celebrate together. So I'm basically, I'm in two homes. I'm in Germany and in Switzerland, and I'm part of the Swiss Demoscene association called Echtzeit, which means real time. They are throughout Switzerland getting together. We are organizing a demo party in Switzerland next year called Mountain Bites. So if you're up for a trip to Switzerland, I invite you to come to our Mountain Bites party. And my German crew is local to the Rhine-Main area where I live when I'm in Germany. And you see this Retrolution shirt. There's a community organizing Retrolution and HomeCon, like community events for doing retro computing and workshops and stuff like that. And the same community, or almost the same community, has also created a museum close to Frankfurt a couple of years, almost 4 years ago, called Digital Retro Park. So I invite you also to that. If you come to Frankfurt, please make sure you visit us in Offenbach at the Digital Retro Park. And last not least, I'm also a member of the Berlin Demoscene Association called Computerkunst, which means computer arts. And this was recently created in Berlin around a Demoscene community there. So get connected, join us on the various channels, ideally via Discord. This is where the Demoscene liaises most. So hopefully you get in touch with whatever channel. Ideally, come to a party. Come to Revision next year over Easter. You'll be thrilled. I promise. Come.
Yeah, and just to add on to that too, I will say that this is the community around both the Demoscene and the retro computing scene. It's one of the best communities I've ever been involved with. People are very accepting. People don't judge other people. In general, the comments are nice and supportive. We all kind of gather around, in our mutual love for either crafting these, amazing demos or enjoying the retro computers from our childhood. And, I've had almost, I don't want to jinx myself, but very few negative comments on my YouTube channel. People are very supportive and love sharing what they know about these systems. So, if you're looking for a good community to get involved with that has a good culture around it, I would highly recommend both these topics, either going to a demo party or getting involved with the Demoscene or checking out the retro computing scene in your community. And by the way, Doc, while you were doing the ad, I snuck away out to the Retro Hack Shack, aka my garage. And out of my collection, I pulled a VIC-20 out just for you. It smells.
It's bigger
like
than I remember.
Computer.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is the VIC-20. Very classic. I remember William Shatner did the ad for the VIC-20 very famously. After his Star Trek career. It was in between Star Trek and what was the other one he did? Hunter.
One of the Hunters and Gatherers.
No. There was the police show he did, but he was Commodore hired him to do the commercial. So if you ever want a little bit of nostalgia with William Shatner, and go see the commercial that he did. But anyway, it's a great system. Really kind of revolutionary in a way. It was the lead up to the C64, which was the most popular computer model ever sold. So cool stuff.
Yeah, Commodore's, I think it was more successful outside the US market. So it was very popular in Europe. So many people got into computing because of the Commodore 64. I'm very sure of it. And if you ever want to learn about the whole history of Commodore, there's a series of books about the company, 3 books by a guy called Brian Bagnell. So if you want to learn everything about Commodore, it's worth reading these 3 books. And he's in fact working on a volume 0, which is Commodore in its pre-computing era. So he's doing a crowdfunding these days to basically inform people what has happened at Commodore before they got into computing.
Nice. Back when they were doing typewriters and calculators, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, fun stuff.
I think it was Jack Tramiel, the head of Commodore and Atari at different times. I have some memory.
Yeah,
he's a real character.
Commodore first, Holocaust survivor. Like you say, he was a real character, but he got stuff done, right? His motto was computers for the masses, not for the classes. When you take a look at what was going on in the industry at the time, like say when the C64 came out, Apple computers were, $1,500 to $2,000 at least back at that time. PCs were that much or more, and here you could go buy a Commodore for like $300, right?
Right, that's what I paid, like $300, which is like $1,000 now or more than that. But still, it was
But comparatively, he really was focused on getting as many of these out the door as possible and getting them into as many hands as possible. And to say what you will about his personality and the way he conducted business, he got stuff done. Right.
I never met him.
Without him, a lot of us wouldn't have had our start in the computer industry.
Yeah. I never met him.
He had a sense for it.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
He basically, what he did was create something or let something create and then squeeze the costs down. So he was very famous for cost reducing everything they built. So basically the first C64 was, I think they started off with $595 US. And then they basically stripped everything down and did a cost reduction version of it. And this was the C64 2 or G in the end. And they basically in the lifespan, they continuously decreased the production cost of the thing. So they had huge revenue streams and profit margins because of this machine, which didn't prevent the bankruptcy in the end because of the huge mismanagement in that was happening all over the place. But this machine basically financed all the crappy stuff they did. Besides the hallmarks like C64 and Amiga.
Yep. And that cost reduction, by the way, is now the bane of many of us who like to fix these machines, right? That's the bane of our existence because they used some cheap memory. They in the same model, they would use whatever they had left over on the shelf, they would throw into these systems. So when you open up a C64, you never quite know what you're going to get. And it makes fixing these things sometimes a challenge, which makes for good YouTube videos. So I can't complain too much.
I almost worked with him 1,000 years ago when I first came to Silicon Valley. And a guy who did work with him says, you don't want to do that because he squeezes everybody but his customers, which is an interesting way to put it. So to wrap this up, Andre, our final two questions. What are your favorite text editor and scripting language?
Oh, text editor is Notepad++, and scripting language is Perl.
Oh, Perl guy. Nice.
That Randall would be proud. That's the fastest answer we've gotten, I think. That's very good. Well, Andre, this has been awesome. There's so you have such a rich vein here, and there's so much we can still talk about. And I'm glad that this is something that's so participatory. Viewers and listeners can follow up with you with everything you talked about. Go to the show notes, twit.tv/floss. Is the short URL for that. Andre's given us a lot of notes to go with her, and Aaron as well has more we'll talk about in a moment. So thanks so much for being on, Andre, again, and we will have you back. This is the kind of thing that bears repetition.
My absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me. I love being with you guys, and I love talking about my passion in these communities. So yeah, I'm glad that comes across. So
excellent. So Aaron, that was a great one.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, of course, you know me. I mean, I could go on and on about this topic for hours. So it's kind of hard to try to condense all this into one show. But like I said, the biggest thing for me is the community that's developed around this. It's I'm not joking about it. I mean, people are very open. You can ask them questions, as Andre was saying, a lot of this code is open and people are willing to kind of explain how they did what they did for a specific demo, or, go out and just search on YouTube if you want to relive some nostalgia about a favorite system. My first system that I learned on, my exposure was on a TRS-80 color computer, and about the same time as the VIC-20. And again, a lot of us credit our careers in technology or in the computer industry with these early systems that we grew up with or learned BASIC on. And every time I run across someone in my work experience that's about the same age as I, will start talking, and eventually we'll say, yeah, I got into this because of the Commodore 64 or the Apple II or what have you. So it's an important part of our history. And I think there are a number of ties into the open source community as well. So great discussion today.
Yeah, I loved how he brought up the difference between then and now is that back then people were a lot more proprietary themselves, in individual actors. And, I have my own cool hack here, but it's mine. And now there's much more of a sharing going on, which is and I don't know if it's that different, but knowing that sharing is so much of what this is about speaks to how important the community is.
Yep, for sure.
So let's get to your plugs. Your Retro Hack Shack, which is about as appropriate as it gets for today's show.
Exactly. I was going to say the same thing. It doesn't get any more appropriate than that. If people want to follow what I do when I'm not co-hosting this show, you can go to my YouTube channel, which is Retro Hack Shack, and take a look at some of the ways that almost all of my shows have some sort of element of either a repair or discovering some of these old systems, or like I said, improving them with some of the mods that people are putting out on the market today for people to use in their retro computers. So if you're interested in that stuff, I'd love for people to take a look at the channel and subscribe. I'm trying to get to 10,000 subscribers, and I'm well on my way. But if there's any FLOSS Weekly listeners or viewers that would like to go over to my channel and subscribe, I'd really appreciate it. And I'll keep making that content available.
I also like how on your show you're getting up, you're moving around. We're talking heads on this one, right? I mean, this is nice and all that, but we're holding still. But you have a very active, involved show, and people actually get to see the stuff you're talking about and to see you. It's a great show. I recommend it, people.
Thanks, Doc. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay, so this has been another FLOSS Weekly. As in the tradition, I don't have in front of me who's up next week, which is Ann Lambert.
I think it's Sam Lambert. Yeah.
Sam. Oh, okay. Sam Lambert. Okay, I'm scrolling down. There it is. Sam Lambert of mxmagnolia.com, Podchaser. Okay, doesn't matter. It'll be cool. It always is. Thanks so much for being with us, and we will see you next time.
Listeners of this program get an ad-free version if they're members of Club TWiT. $7 a month gives you ad-free versions of all of our shows, plus membership in the Club TWiT Discord, a great clubhouse for TWiT listeners. And finally, the TWiT Plus feed with shows like Stacy's Book Club, The Untitled Linux Show, The Giz Fizz, and more. Go to twit.tv/clubtwit. And thanks for your support.